Hey guys, are you feeling shut down by the pandemic? Not sure? Well, today we are going to talk about some probably surprising ways of how and why the pandemic is doing this and what we can do about it starting right now. That way we can start feeling amazing right now. Plus, I'm going to share a little bit more about me today. Hey guys, it's Vanessa V. Welcome to my channel where we discuss reigning over your life, conquering what's holding you back, and living life in victory each day using simplified strategies that work for you, especially during this pandemic. Just in case you're not familiar with me, I am an actress and speaker. I host workshops, and I also am living with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. I am not, however, a mental health care professional or a healthcare professional. I am an expert in my own situation and what works for me, and my hope is that by sharing this information with you that I've had to master over all these years, that it will help you just like it's helped me and so many others. Okay, so first, before we get to anything, I wanted to introduce one of my old ratty hats that I've had for years because I love hats. I just wanted to feel a little bit more cozy, and I also didn't really want to do anything with my hair. Secondly, you are amazing. You are absolutely incredible. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Even if we haven't met yet, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on YouTube, you are incredible, and I thank you very much for being here. Okay, let's get started. So yeah, we are talking about being shut down today by the pandemic. I have, if you haven't been able to tell, but if you've been watching my videos over the past few weeks, I have definitely been sort of declining into a state of feeling shut down. And it's something that I've been wanting to talk about really since the beginning, but again, as usual, there's like all sorts of topics that come into play, and then I end up not getting to ones that I think are important because other ones are also important. And last week, as you know, I did not post a video in observance of 9/11, but it would have definitely been the video that I did because last week, well, actually, no, I probably wouldn't have done a video last week anyway. Because I truly was, honestly, probably at my worst since this pandemic started, and I needed that time. So it actually lined up beautifully because I would have felt horrible about not posting because I really, really care about you all, and I want to share, and I want to share as much as I can as often as possible, especially during this craziness that we're all in. In thinking about doing this video, it actually, just a little bit of backstory because it does have to do with the topic. It's been really difficult for me to sort of put this one together because it is such a huge topic, you know? And I guess when you first think about it, maybe it doesn't seem like that because being shut down by the pandemic emotionally, mentally, physically, it can seem kind of simple, right? There's the bad guy, the pandemic, and then there's how it's affecting me. It's A plus B equals C, right? But there's so much happening mechanically, and there's so much going on, and we all are experiencing different things and reacting differently. And so I really wasn't sure how to go about doing the video. And I was kind of feeling indecisive, like we talked about a few videos ago. I'll link that below. And so I was feeling that freeze state of, I don't know what to do, and then my stress and anxiety was going up and all that stuff. So it was good to have that time off like we've talked about in other videos. So I do want to post it this week because I think it's definitely something that's affecting us all. And it really came to a head for me last week. There's a hair on my chin. There we are. Thanks. Okay, so again, I'm not really sure exactly how to go about this. So I feel like what might be the best course of action is just to kind of share with you guys how the pandemic has been affecting me, how it's been shutting me down more specifically, and some of the things that I've been doing to combat that from the beginning and starting a few weeks ago once I started to really realize what was going on, in hopes that that can also be something that you can use as well in your own life. And as usual, as always, it's all about customizing to you. So whatever works for me may not work for you, or it may. But either way, if you know, if there's something that I say or suggest that you need to modify, go ahead and do it. Again, you know you best. So all of these ideas are just for inspiration and just to show you what works and what doesn't work for me. And that way it might help you realize what you might want to do as well. Okay. And really quick before we get started, something that I would suggest for you to do right now is to hit pause on my face and write down with a pen or a pencil and paper or on your phone, or just sort of, you know, jot it down in your mind. Kind of just thinking, how has the pandemic affected me in a negative way? And some of the ways that we can figure that out is, what are some changes that we've noticed within ourselves that were not there prior to the pandemic? Have we been making choices that aren't necessarily in line with how we would have made choices previously, that don't necessarily feel very good or aren't working us towards being our most healthiest, best selves? So first off, it is totally normal to feel these negative things from experiences like pandemics. It's absolutely normal. So I'm not here to tell us to not feel those things or to shove them away or ignore them or to say that it's wrong or bad that we're feeling them. It's totally normal. And like I've said before, feelings are information, right? And so by looking at emotions and our emotional reactions to things as informative occurrences, that can really help us dig down and figure out what's the root cause, or why am I thinking the way I'm thinking or acting the way I'm acting? What's the root cause for anything negative going on in my life? That can really help. But just honoring the fact that we know that the pandemic is probably going to cause some negative things, no matter how strong we are, no matter how strong-willed we are. There's probably going to be some not so good poo-pooey feels. One of the things that it's going to do is cause us to have that fight, flight, or freeze reactions that we talk about in previous videos, which I'll link below. And for me, I've been experiencing a lot of flight stuff, so a lot of energy that keeps me up at night. It also keeps me distracted and avoiding the present, like we've talked about. But when I'm sort of talking about feeling shut down, from my perspective, it's mostly that flight or freeze reaction that we've talked about. So either feeling like I can't move, or I can't make decisions, or I can't do anything, I'm just gonna stay here and hold out until this ends, or I'm gonna flight, whatever that means to you. Maybe dissociating a lot into things, zoning out into distracting things like TV and movies and stuff like that, where we start to just sort of get a little bit hazier and perhaps we don't notice it right away, especially if we're just pushing through it. There can obviously be, like I said earlier, lots of different reactions. But for me, I've noticed that even though I have had a lot of flight energy, mostly what it's done is caused me to sort of flight and freeze. Even though from the very beginning, I expected to have these reactions occur because they're very normal. That's how our brain works. And I took some very active, focused, approachable steps to combat that, but still it can creep up on you, especially if you're distracted with kids or work, etc. And because a lot of times we do tend to be so busy with other stuff that we tend to not really notice it growing. Maybe we feel it, but it doesn't necessarily strike us as big as it might be until it starts getting in the way of stuff. And then we go, ooh, oh, that's right. Oh, but also because the pandemic comes with a lot of logical or seemingly logical reactions that weren't necessarily as logical prior, but now are, and we are having to adapt them almost quite quickly. And there's a lot of mixed information out there. So things like avoiding, that used to be, prior to the pandemic, in large part, avoiding social interaction was usually something that was seen as not as healthy, right? So isolating oneself. Now it's more logical than it used to be. sitting. We're home more, and so we are probably sitting a lot more, which used to be something that we were encouraged to not do. Hello. But now it's sort of like, well, what else are you gonna do, right? Being higher alert about things like germs, being around people, and contamination. So as we're trying to juggle all of these things that our brain, and therefore us, had previously sort of been told were not necessarily healthier choices, are now perhaps the healthy choice. And it's become such a sudden thing, and the stakes are so high related to that, right? Life and death, that it's almost a shock to the system, right? And so as we're trying to juggle all of these things and sort of put everything in its place and categorize, because that's how humans tend to be able to handle situations, is to organize and put things in boxes, we can sort of miss what's occurring underneath the surface, emotionally, physically, mentally, in all these different areas that we are going to talk about in a future video for sure. And over time, like me, you can start to feel kind of shut down, especially if you have had that flight reaction of go, 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 distract, 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 just do stuff, do stuff. If you're not stopping to recharge, that's not very sustainable, which is something that we talk about on here, is living sustainably no matter what's going on around us, and living in a way that works for us. And so if you have been feeling that flight energy, or well, yeah, that fight energy specifically, where you do have a lot of energy and it just keeps coming and coming and coming, and you're not recharging, that can actually cause you to feel shut down as well, because you're just totally drained. So just go ahead and hit pause once again and just kind of jot down or consider ways that, like I said earlier, the pandemic is affecting you, but perhaps more specifically. And what kind of survival reaction do you think you're having? Do you think it's a flight reaction, fight reaction, what's the other one? Freeze. Or perhaps a mix of two or all three. So in my preparation, and something that I've continued to try to do, was understanding that situations that are super high stakes, that are really emotionally upsetting, can often trigger us to go into old habits. Default coping skills, like what we've talked about, I'll link that below too, but default coping skills that used to work for us that really no longer do. Now, I, in the beginning, allowed myself to sort of ease up on some of those things, like junk food. You know, like, is it gonna really hurt me if I eat it for 6 months or whatever? Not like enormously, but no, probably not. And is it gonna help me walk through this pandemic easier? If I keep an eye on it, yes. So that was definitely one thing that I tried to do. It didn't entirely work out, and I noticed that a couple weeks ago, so I'll get to that in a few minutes. Also, things like my sleeping routine. I used to go to bed, not really strictly. I try to not be strict about anything. I definitely used to be, but now I try not to. But I got more relaxed with it. And also waking up in the morning, much more relaxed. Because I find for myself, having a more looser structure in times like this, when I know it's gonna work for me, does in fact help. Even if it's just a short term thing, like a day or a week or whatever, it's definitely something I know I can personally lean on. Now, once again, because I was so distracted, like what we talked about, that also got a little, it got out of hand. And I'll talk about that in a minute too. So as I mentioned, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder about 6 or 7 years ago. And one thing that I had to do when I got diagnosed, and ever since then, is sort of understand what was going on with me mechanically, how I was reacting to my emotions, to that survival reactions that I was having, how what occurred to me was affecting me up to that point, and would probably continue to affect me in certain ways, and all that stuff. But what I really had to understand was basically the human condition, human nature. How do people act? How am I acting when I am hit with extreme survival situations that are coming up in flashbacks? How did I react when what caused it occurred? How was my fear and my anger and all of the negative emotions that I was feeling affecting me and clouding who I was at my core? And how was that affecting the person that I was and am without trauma? Luckily, I guess for me, understanding humans and anthropology and stuff like that is extremely interesting to me, probably because of my trauma, wanting to know why. Why did this happen to me? Why am I having this reaction before understanding what it was? So all of that combined, didn't mean to get on a tangent, but all of that combined, so my knowledge from prior to the pandemic, all of the work I had done to really making sure that no matter what's going on around me, I am me, I am balanced, I am at peace. I can walk through anything without being super affected by it, but still acknowledging it and feeling things. Just continuing to be myself and thinking rationally about things no matter how scary they seem. Because all of that is really important for people that have had post-traumatic stress disorder or have it. Reality. This is something that I do plan to talk about. There are a lot of different ideas about what reality is if you get very philosophical about it. But generally speaking, because I have post-traumatic stress disorder and I have had issues with flashbacks and zoning out and stuff like that, reality is very important to me because I need to be able to balance myself, ground myself, be present, and understand what is actually going on. That I really rely on checks and balances, checking and balancing my sources, checking and balancing myself, and trying to come to a very logical, balanced, approachable, and sustainable lifestyle during this pandemic, if that makes sense. So checks and balances, critical thinking, those are things that I've always done even before I got diagnosed. But that's definitely something that I really have leaned on, especially since getting diagnosed, because that has helped me, like I just mentioned. But I think what it helped me decide in the beginning was just quite naturally, I'm going to approach everything that I hear with caution. And that doesn't necessarily mean I decide what's right and what's not from what the experts are saying or anything like that, because I'm not a scientist. But I knew, especially with my knowledge of history, that things change over time. And so what they might say one day may not be what they say the next week, because they're learning while we're learning. And so I just try to approach everything from a state of caution, not fear. And that, to me, there's a difference, at least for me. Fear would have been, oh my gosh, I'm so scared because the stakes are so high, it's life and death, etc., etc., etc. I'm going to buy into that fear and I'm going to hide in my house. Or I'm going to go out in the world and I'm going to rebel or whatever. I wanted to make sure that that's not what my driving force was. My driving force was going to be logic, gathering as much information as I could, and no matter what, going through the process just with caution, with logical caution, even though I'm going to feel stuff. Going back to, no matter what, I will approach everything with a sense of caution. And I think for me that also helped not everything become so extreme. If I had approached contamination with fear instead of caution, that could have triggered, and here I go sharing with you some info I haven't shared before, my obsessive compulsive disorder, my OCD, which is basically when you obsess over things. And mine was never really for germs, but in middle school, it was at its worst. I don't have it really as much at all anymore because I worked so hard on it. But anyway, I knew the pandemic could easily trigger an OCD relapse and really throw me back into those default coping skills that feel like they're working, but really in the end, they're oftentimes superficial. And so approaching the germ aspect about COVID, I needed for me to approach it with caution, not fear. Because caution to me meant a much more gray area, a much more balanced area. And so I wipe down everything that comes in, or I set it aside for a few days. And that's that. I don't touch my eyes or my nose or my mouth. And that's that. When I go out, I wear a mask. I try and stay 6 feet apart. But I am not afraid. I am logically making decisions that we have been told are helpful. And that is what I am doing. And for the sake of time, I will move on. Same thing with eating. Another thing that I haven't shared on here before is that I have had eating disorders throughout my life that are connected to my post-traumatic stress disorder that I didn't realize were. But again, I knew ahead of time that the pandemic could trigger within me eating disorder issues. And even though I feel very strong about that not occurring, when stakes are high and you're in a survival mode, your brain can make you think and do things that are not logical, right? And so one thing that I did was I just tried to pay very much attention to my thoughts about food, my feelings about myself and my body. Was I turning to food for comfort? And if so, was that helping me or not, etc. But basically, in a nutshell, the entire point that I'm trying to get to in this video is not only so that you don't feel so alone and to help inspire you with ideas, but to help us understand that our brain, like I think I mentioned in the Brain Explained video, is always looking for red flags in our environment for safety. That is the whole entire point of having a brain, is to keep us safe. That's its job. And so whether we realize it or not, that's what's happening. And this pandemic is seriously bringing up a lot of red flags that are new or that are reinforcing old habits that we worked really hard to not buy into, that now seem kind of logical to buy into. So then what do we do and how do we balance it all? And what it can do is not only make this situation feel worse than it has to. It's a horrible situation, but it can make it feel even worse. And it can also cause us to have long-lasting effects that we may not realize because we are buying into these feelings and we are perhaps becoming so ingrained in this way of dealing with our stress that isn't necessarily the healthiest for us. And once this pandemic is over with, I've noticed for myself in, over my life that old habits don't necessarily stop just because the situation that called for them stopped. They can continue. And then we're presented with these habits or these coping skills that no longer really work for us and are getting in the way, and we feel confused. We don't know why. We don't understand why we can't stop them. And it can actually prolong the effects of the pandemic a little bit. And so I really wanted to raise awareness on that because that's not what I want for you. And that's what I've been trying to fight the entire pandemic, is not necessarily, well, is not just getting COVID, but also not getting negative old habits again, not getting long-lasting versions of trauma because of all of the emotional hell that I went through, which again is completely valid and plausible if that's what you're feeling. And so yeah, last week I really noticed that all of it had just sort of come to a head. I had not given myself enough stop, drop, and roll time. Like we talked about in the previous video, I had not given myself enough time to recover long term. Short term, yeah, but still not really, because I had started to add more stuff onto my plate, and there was just a lot of emotions that I wasn't realizing, even though I thought I was addressing it. It's still, you know, it's never perfect. Each day is a new day. You're improvising through life, and you know, bumps happen. So some of the things that I started doing last week, well, really a week and a half ago, but really last week, that I want to go over with you are that I needed to stop eating ice cream. Why? Honestly, prior to the pandemic, I love ice cream. I love sprinkles, but I probably ate ice cream maybe once or twice a year. And then during the pandemic, like I mentioned earlier, I sort of relaxed my junk foodness. And I realized last week that I probably ate like 2 Ben & Jerry's pints per week, which meant I was eating some form of ice cream spread out maybe 4 or 5 days a week. And that's really not something that I wanted to do. And so what I started to do was something that I call soft changes. So it's a much less black and white, snappy, structured change that to me doesn't really always feel very good. And it tends to not be as sustainable. So what I instead decided to do was I still had ice cream in the freezer, so I didn't throw it out because I knew later on I would want some and then I would feel really depleted. So instead what I decided to do, and this is something that I do, is just go, okay, I'm still going to eat ice cream. I'm not going to strip that coping skill away from me, even though it's not a positive one right now. I'm just going to try to not eat ice cream today. And tomorrow I'll see how I feel. And what it's actually done for me is I haven't bought ice cream since. I still have some ice cream left over in that pint, and I know it's there. And it's not a life or death thing, you know. If I end up eating it, okay, fine. But it's more about helping myself and my brain feel more comfortable. Oops, I just kicked the tripod. Feel more comfortable about handling my emotions in more healthier ways. Because if I was to strip that thing that my brain has now returned to thinking is the only thing that's going to keep me safe is eating this ice cream right now because it's helping me avoid how raw I feel. If I stripped that away, all it's going to do is tell my brain, oh my gosh, I don't know how to handle this danger, and then freak out, and then I'm really going to want ice cream, and then I'll probably end up buying ice cream and eating more than I actually wanted to. Does that make sense? So that's how it tends to happen for me. Another thing that I've been really trying hard to do is to move more, to get up, move my body, move in my space, take up more space, get out of the house, and just physically become more active, because this pandemic has really sort of forced many of us into a more sedentary lifestyle, which can have negative effects. And I am planning on actually doing an upcoming video about that and the importance of movement. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. The next thing is sort of like soft changes, having more soft structure. So making sure that I go to bed earlier instead of at 4 a.m. like I've been doing because of that fight energy I've been feeling at night. I just have so much energy. And of course that's affected me waking up in the morning. And so I haven't been working out as much. And it really is quite important. So instead of being at 9 o'clock, I'm going to sleep. Instead it's, I'm going to try and go to bed earlier. And I'm going to try and wake up earlier. And I'm going to put more soft structure into my nighttime routine and my morning routine. I do have certain routines that I do that we will talk about, but I became much more relaxed about them because I was trying to make and help myself feel less stressed. And in the beginning it helped, but of course over time it started to sort of get in the way, and yeah. I'm also an extreme history buff. I lived in Gettysburg. That's where I met my husband. I worked at a museum. Like, I love history. And I think my knowledge of how people tend to act, that it never really changes, and history tends to repeat itself. All of that combined with my knowledge about pandemics and stuff, I had all of that when I entered into the pandemic like we all did. But that helped prepare me in a way where it didn't affect me as much. And my hope is that us all going through this situation doesn't break us. It actually prepares us for continuing to live beyond the pandemic and helping us to be stronger, more empowered, more inspired, more close to who we actually are despite what's going on around us, and living in more joy starting now, starting today, not waiting for the pandemic to be over and then we'll do it, but really trying to figure out starting today, how can I do that? How can I blossom and grow and be who I am now? And not still feel incredibly raw and terrified at the same time. So that's what we're going to talk about next. So before we get to the next part, I do want to just invite you to press pause again and just jot down some of the things that you've been doing during this pandemic that have been helping you. Perhaps things that you unknowingly had been prepared for in this pandemic prior to the pandemic. So before the pandemic, what had prepared you to deal with it better? And one of the reasons that I want to invite you to do that is because those might be things, if they are working for you, that you might want to continue to do. And not in an extreme way or anything, but those might be things that you want to continue to lean on. But acknowledging it may actually help you lean on them more. So the last thing that I am going to suggest, and I know this has been a long video. I know it has, and thank you for sticking around. But honestly, I think this is one of those videos that really calls for just a good discussion, a deep, nitty-gritty discussion in everything, because this is such a huge situation that we're in. So it's really important to just sit down and talk about it. So thanks for still being here. But the last thing that I'm going to suggest is my literal #1 suggestion for walking through this pandemic, not getting through it, but walking through this pandemic, is probably something that none of us want to hear. And I think you might know what it might be. And I'm only going to suggest it because it really does work. I have had years of having to accept this and cultivate it and practice it and master it and all that stuff. And it really does work. I would never say or suggest to do something that did not absolutely work for me. Okay, here's what it is. Use this experience to step into you. Use this time and this turmoil and this discomfort and all of the things that it is bringing us and presenting to us to get closer to who you truly are, the best version of yourself, the self inside of you that is vulnerable, that wants to come out, that wants to bloom and blossom and speak and shine. Use this time to hone that. And it really, I think it is kind of a skill, because not only do we have to be open to that and take time to discover what that means, what that is, but also to trust in it and follow it and experiment, trying it out, figuring out who that person is, and all of the feelings that we are feeling are opportunities. And I hear you. I absolutely hear you. You don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. And it is also true. It really is. And if we use this time to build ourselves up, to gain strength, to make it so that we are the calm within the storm. I did not make up that phrase. I don't know who did, but I love it. Being that calm within the storm. No matter what's going on out there, you are calm. No matter what situation is presented to you, you are full of peace. You are calm. You have the grace to walk through that situation. It may affect you, but it doesn't become you. It doesn't bleed into you. And it only fuels that fire that you have inside of you. That is how I want us to see this situation. Yes, it is shit. It is absolute crap. And what it's doing to other people, what it's doing to you, it's horrible. And it is also an opportunity to not crumble underneath it, to rise up and to forever rise higher and be better and be more. And you deserve it. You are worth it. Just like I said in the beginning, you are incredible. You really are. And the world can try and tear us down. It can try and literally destroy who we are and make us who the world wants us to be. But this is an opportunity to say, no, that is not me. I know who I am, and I'm going to start to practice letting her out or letting him out. Because the world right now needs you. The world needs your light. The world is very dark right now, and we all have this light to give. And if we allow the pandemic to dim us, to dull us, to cloud us over, and to shut us down and hide our light, I mean, I know that sounds silly, but it's true. The world won't be as bright. It sounds cliche, but it's absolutely true. That's one reason that I do the videos, because even if it helps one of you, honestly, like, I feel like my light, as scary as it is, because it's scary every week, it's scary. But if my light is able to shine out and help spark other lights, I truly believe that it helps make the world a better place, that it helps have a ripple effect. Who do you want to be at the end of this pandemic? Where do you want to be? What do you want your journey to have looked like? So I encourage you to explore your inner self. Explore what excites you, what calms you, what's positive, what feels good, what helps you feel the most at ease, the most natural. And are those things positive? Do they help you? Do they help others? Are they sustainable? Experiment, try new things, test yourself, stretch yourself, and take this pandemic off the pedestal and put yourself on the pedestal. You are bigger than this situation. You are bigger than any situation. You need you, and the world needs you. You have a choice to start trusting in yourself and in the process. And if that's where you need to start small. Don't jump ahead and try and tackle it all at once. Just start a little small. If we take all those things that we looked at throughout this video, that can be a great starting point also. It's just what's holding me back? And where can I start to grow? And just choosing, again, that I am not going to be shut down by this pandemic. I'm going to start myself up, and I'm going to shine bright. And really quick before we go, just feel free to shut your eyes and repeat after me. I am brave. I am magnetic. I am awesome. I am courageous. I am beautiful. My soul deserves to shine. I deserve to have a voice, and I will speak. I will brighten this world each day in my own wonderful, amazing ways. I deserve to be here. I am full of worth, and I am enough. That's it. So again, thanks for sticking around, and I feel better. I feel so much better. So I hope you have an amazing week, an amazing day, an amazing future, and I can't wait to hear from you all what you learned from today, what you have to share that I can learn from. Also, feel free to comment below or private message me as always. Feel free to connect with me on social media. I would love to connect with you. Like or dislike this video. It's always cool either way. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. And just remember, you got this. It's your time to shine. This cannot defeat you, and you are so worth it. and I'll see you next time. Bye. Mwah. Have an awesome day.